Oh boy, I'm sure the fans will love me for this. So anyway, here's a ranking of every Panic at the Disco album. Panic at the Disco was originally one of those 2000 pop-punk emo bands, back when they originally formed in 2004. To put their member history lightly, everyone except for their lead singer Brendan Urie has left. So I'm just gonna say the member history as fast as I can, okay? Okay, Spencer Smith, Ryan Ross, Brent Wilson, and Brendan Urie formed Panic at the Disco. Wilson left and was replaced by John Walker. Walker and Ross left the band while Weeks would join the band. Spencer left the band, and Weeks would later leave the band. Wow, that was a mouthful. And I would say each album is entirely different from the other, so this might be an interesting video to make. I know the fandom for Panic at the Disco is pretty intense, but please understand my negative remarks I make are all coming from a place of love. Hell, I wouldn't even talk about Panic at the Disco if I didn't even like them. Since I want to get this over with, let's get this video started with... I feel like if you've read my written reviews for these albums on my Album of the Year and Rate Your Music page, you knew this would be right at the bottom. It easily showcases every weakness Panic has at full front, being terrible lyrics, overblown production, and just being really boring. I guess that's the worst thing about this album. It's incredibly boring. Hell, I've listened to this album literally before writing this part of the video, and most of the songs have just pretty much left my head, and I can't remember most of them, since each of them is just coated in such a heavy amount of horns. I mean, I didn't mind them on Death of a Bachelor, but it's just way too much here. Sure, it may be inspired by Broadway musicals, but that doesn't fix it. I feel like the bigger the sound of the song, the more hollow the album just feels as a whole. I mean, I still get PTSD whenever I hear High Hopes being blasted on the radio. While some people may have a problem with Hey Look Ma I Made It, I think it's an enjoyable track and it's certainly the most interesting song to stick out from the rest of the album. I also enjoy Silver Lining and Saturday Night, but I think those are all the tracks I kinda like. Dancing's Not a Crime has terrible lyrics, One of the Drunks may be my least favorite Panic at the Disco song, and Brendan's voice is just kinda awful on the song Dying in LA. This album is just very mediocre in general, but it's a terrible album for a band that used to be so much more interesting and unique. If Panic were just to be now a Brendan Urie solo project, I don't think I would have minded it. This album is a very mixed bag to say the least. Before getting into the negatives, I still really enjoy This Is Gospel as a song. It's easily my favorite off the album because I just think it's the most dynamic song off the album as well. I think Brendan's performance is really solid and I just love the way his voice just soars through the chorus. It's well written and everything works so well in the song as well. Hell, Miss Jackson and Nicotine are also quite good as well, despite being different sides of the spectrum in terms of mood. While Jackson is more upbeat and sounds like something you hear at a sports game, Nicotine sounds like a claustrophobic rave while having an anxiety attack. It's a weird feeling, but I feel like if you'd listen to it, you'd get it. I like it when the album tries to pull off different and unique vibes, as it feels like the album has a sense of character to it. However, by the second half of the album, I feel like most of the songs start to blend in, and I really mean blend in. I swear that Casual Affair and Far Too Young to Die really just sound the same to me, so much so that I often get these songs mixed up all the time. I feel like the same would be said for the closer track, The End of All Things, but it has some of the worst vocal effects I've ever heard on a Panic record, and it somehow is worse than the vocal effects on Nails for Breakfast on A Fever You Can't Sweat Out. I know Girls, Girls, Boys is a fan favorite, and I just don't enjoy it. It really annoys the ever-living shit out of me, to be real. I like the overall message of the song, but the instrumentation in Brendan's voice just sounds way too sugary for my ears. The Girl You Want has a boring instrumentation with an annoying stutter effect running through the song, and it sounds like even Brendan doesn't even want to be there. I don't think the album is bad, but it's more boring than anything. It's not weird, and it's not rare, I would say. Well, I can't make these kinds of remarks. That was bad. I'm sorry. If the bonus tracks were on the standard release, I think this would be like number 3 or something, but here we are, I guess. Honestly, out of all the Panic albums, I kind of forget about this one the most, because I don't think it really stands out that much in terms of the other ones, to be honest. This is also the first album to not feature primary songwriter Ryan Ross, who was pretty much the main driving force on the first two albums. So the songwriting duties go to Brendan Urie. And yeah, you really can tell that it's not going to be as good as Rocks, but I think there are still some hidden gems on this thing. I love the opener, The Ballad of Mona Lisa, as it showcases Brendan can still write a solid enough pop song despite being not lyrically as gifted as Ross. Hell, the experimentation on this album is actually kind of neat, to be honest. Let's Kill Tonight tries to combine this orchestrated instrumental along with the style of the album Villains by Queens of the Stone Age. Always is a very nice acoustic passage that has a soothing instrumental. And Nearly Witches is a theatrical type song that sounds like it would come off of Folie à Deux, which it's also a great song because it's also written by Ryan Ross. While some of the ideas are neat, they don't really work well in execution most of the time. I think some of the songs are just kinda okay. At times, they can also be mediocre as well. Looking at You, Ready to Go. These songs also don't have that punch that other releases have, as I often forget about some of the songs. I've said before that they're not bad, but they're mostly just underwhelming in comparison to their other stuff. I still think it's an okay album, but I just wish those bonus tracks were on the actual album because they're pretty goddamn good. I'm still surprised that I actually really like this album. This is also the first solo effort for Panic at the Disco because everyone basically fucked off and it's just Brendan Urie at this point. This album is basically Too Weird to Live, Too Weird to Die, but better. The album has this vibe of feeling like you're on top of the world, but in reality, you're actually at the bottom of the barrel, and this is easily heard on a song like Don't Threaten Me with a Good Time, as it talks about someone finding themselves somewhere strange after a night of heavy drinking. With the sample of Rock Lobster by the B-52s, it's a fun song that has some dark themes. Emperor's New Clothes is a fun and jaunty song that's also very perfect for Halloween, as it encapsulates the feeling that I mentioned a couple sentences ago. It seems like the character is just fully embracing their power, but in reality, we actually never see him do that. Another song that hints that Brendan can make a great song on his own is the title track. The title track is just Brendan Urie acknowledging a new chapter in life, from getting married to him being the sole remaining member of Panic, and other shit. The song is just one giant ode to what the future has in store for all of us, and obviously Frank Sinatra. I really enjoy the chorus and lyrics on House of Memories, as I think it's easily one of the most underrated songs in the Panic catalog. I find it a very cute song as it talks about spending time with someone you love. Sure, there are some songs on here such as The Good, The Bad, and The Dirty and Golden Days that I'm not really the biggest fan of, but I still really enjoy these songs from time to time. Hell, a song like Victorious has even gone from being a song I initially couldn't stand to one of the most defining songs of the album for me. Out of all the Panic albums, I feel like people underrate this one the most. Sure, it doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it doesn't need to. It's just a fun pop rock album that just so happens to have some pretty great songs on it. And now for the spots you saw a mile away. From what I've seen from critics and audiences is that this album is very divisive. You either despise this thing with a passion or you love this thing. And obviously I fall into the latter category. This is easily one of the most unique pop-punk albums I've ever heard. When albums like Take This to Your Grave and Bleed American were getting big, Panic at the Disco decided to take a unique approach to the genre. They added elements of Baroque, cabaret, big band, and even synth pop. And for some reason, it just works really well in the end. There are songs like The Only Difference Between Martyrdom and Suicide is Press Coverage and London Beckon songs about money written by machines that may sound like ordinary pop-punk tunes, but they do add something that makes them stand out with Ryan Ross's cynical lyrics about artists and record labels. Hell, there are even some dark tracks on here, such as the kinda infamous Nails for Breakfast, Tax for Snacks. And while I don't like the auto-tune vocals, I love the grim vibe and somewhat depressing lyrics about Ryan Ross's father's alcoholism. Every song on this album just brings out something new to the table, whether it be the synths on songs like Time to Dance, the big band orchestration on There's a Good Reason These Tables Are Numbered, Honey, You Just Haven't Thought of It Yet, which is a really long title, and the cellos on the closer, Build God and Then We'll Talk. The album still knows how to have fun with itself, which is most evidently seen in what I would consider the band's biggest hit of all time, I Write Sins Not Tragedies. I mean, there is a great reason on why that song still gets airplay more than 15 years later. The album also knows how to pull a certain emotion with the listener, whether it be anxiety on Lying is the Most Fun a Girl Can Have Without Taking Her Clothes Off, or with anger on Kamisado. This album is great, and I love the way it handles it, all these different ideas and themes, and just somehow turns it into gold. I think the album gets too much hate to a certain extent, as I think it's a little more clever than you might have thought. Listen to it again, you might actually enjoy it. Or not, you might dislike it. Again, this is a very decisive album. Bro, imagine being a fan of Panic back in 2005 and then having to wait until 2008 for this album to drop. Man, that must have been a wild ride back then. Instead of taking more influences on pop punk and dance music like their previous album, this album takes more influences of pop rock and baroque pop. I guess it's like a modern day Rubber Souls in some sort of weird sense. And they knew this would shake up their fandom. With the cheeky opener of We're So Starving to the beautiful 9 in the Afternoon, the album takes a lot more risks that really pay off as the album progresses. With cuts like the more psychedelic She's a Handsome Woman and the more straightforward pop rock cuts like That Green Gentleman or even Northern Downpour. I love the more folk rock cuts that the album offers, such as She Had the World and even Beyond the Sea, which sounds like something straight out of the Renaissance era. Ryan Ross really outdid himself on the lyrical department, as I think some of the best lyrical gems of the entire band comes on this album. Songs like The Piano Knows Something I Don't Know have this vague yet abstract nature to it, but it somehow doesn't make it distracting. I think the deep cuts on the album really shine, as much as I really love the singles off the album. Do You Know What I'm Seeing is another underrated deep cut that has one of the most soothing songs the band has ever done, and When the Day Met the Night is easily the most beautiful song the band has ever put together. Also, Ryan Ross has some vocal works on this album, and I really like his singing. His singing works on songs like the anthemic closer Mad as Rabbits, as his voice works as a nice companion to Brendan Urie's voice, as it's more calmer and lower compared to Brendan's more operatic vocal style. I like the aforementioned She Had the World, as it has Urie and Ross playing two different characters to really help create the scene. Overall, this album is just amazing on all fronts, and despite having a negative impact on the band internally, the album is still a fun album to just sit back and relax to, and it really sucks that they stopped playing these songs live. Well, I already know you hated that video, so what is your Panic at the Disco album ranking? And you can tell me that in the comments below. Please subscribe, like, whatever, do whatever. I'm the standard YouTube outro. I do plan on working on more Worst to Best frequently because I really want to get these out and I really love making these videos. For right now, I do plan on having one currently. I'm going to work on one right after this, being the band Muse, because I always wanted to do them, and I think they're having a new album out soon, I hope, because they released that new single. I might make a video on that single. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. Yeah. 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 Oh, you know this part. Come on. What a shame for a